Bill. Really appreciate you coming on our podcast today. I think a lot of people know you, but you are Bill Tait, State Farm Insurance. Before we get into things, I have a story that I want to share about how we came to first meet. Really, it was through my wife, April, and it was a few years ago. She, thanks to the recommendation of another entrepreneur, said, "Hey, I think we should join the Southlake Chamber of Commerce. I think we should do it." And we did. And she went to new member orientation,
Yeah.
and you were there. And at the end of it, you offered up to everyone there, "Hey, if you've got questions, like come talk to me. Happy to meet for coffee and help you. I want everyone in this room to be successful." And she's telling me this story after the fact, and she said, like, I went up to him and I said, "Hey, like, I'd love to talk more." And you said, "Sure, let's grab coffee." I think y'all went to, was it Jane's
Yep.
maybe? Yeah. And y'all had coffee, and after that, she just came home excited, like excited about the decision to join the chamber, but also like she just felt welcomed. And that was because you extended that offer. She was smart enough to take you up on that. But for everyone that's listening or watching this episode, I think it speaks a lot about your character and who you are, Bill. But also, like, for those listening, like, if Bill Tait offers you help, like, take him up on it, because it has opened doors for us. So I want to start off by thanking you for what you've done for us, Bill.
Well, I appreciate that. Humbled to have you say that. I moved here about 8 years ago, didn't know a single person, and just started experimenting with the Southlake Chamber just to see, could I do this? Could I not do this? I got the same warm reception as your wife did when I joined. And I remember sitting in office one day and an ambassador showed up, wanted to meet with me. I'd only been in business about a month. I'd talk to anybody at that point. And she came in, sat down, and really what she talked about was the Southlake Chamber and, if there was anything that she could do to help acclimate me into the chamber and the community. And the whole time I'm sitting there just dumbfounded, like somebody just walked in my office just to help me. And she asked me, "Is there any particular industry that you would like me to introduce you to, people that work in that industry?" And believe it or not, at that moment, I had no idea what she was talking about. I was like, but I played along. I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Well, what kind of industry do you think I'd like?" And she was like, maybe realtors. "Oh, yeah. Realtors would be good. Yeah. Mortgage. Oh, mortgage is great. So I got such a warm welcome from the Southlake Chamber that once I started to get really active in it, I wanted to pass that back to anyone else that I could help. I never would have thought 8 years ago that I would be doing the new member orientation for the chamber, because I was just new myself. But I really listened to what they had to offer, and I saw the big picture. I saw organizations that I can go and talk to. I saw groups that have networking events. I saw all these opportunities for me to meet new people, and I took advantage of every single one. I mean, I went to every single thing I could. And then I started to get active in volunteering, and I started meeting more people and more people. And where it really helped me was in my industry. I mean, I've got thousands of clients, and there's not a week that goes by where somebody doesn't call that needs something, a referral to this particular industry. And being so ingrained in the community and in the chamber, I was able to provide a name for someone that I either personally worked with or personally knew. So I had 100% confident when I did refer someone that all I was going to get was praises from that person. So it's been an amazing tool to help grow not only my business in the community, but my name personally as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Has that, and that's one of the things that you have become known for, is just your involvement in the community. You sponsor a lot of events. Why has that become so important to you? Like, both personally, professionally, what has that done?
Well, growing up, my father was a huge volunteer. March of Dimes, Make-A-Wish, anything that he could do, we got involved in as a family. I mean, I was out there with the little shakers, shaking cups, to get change put in there. And I understood why we did it, but I wasn't getting the feeling of like a feel good for doing it because I just didn't understand yet. So once I moved here, the first year was just hustle. I mean, it was just go, 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 go. And then after the first year, I decided it was time for me to start giving back. So my first step was the Southlake Chamber. I got involved, started volunteering to do things. It felt good, but what it led me to were other nonprofits and organizations based, right here in the city that I was able to get involved with and give back that really touched me. That there was a motivating factor that I felt good from what I did. For example, I was on the board for Metroport Meals on Wheels for years, and me and another gentleman in town used to do big parties to raise money for them, and it just felt good knowing that part of our society, the seniors, were getting fresh food. They were getting visits from individuals, so they weren't just sitting at home lonely all the time. I've been involved with Pro Players Association now as well, and then also the Carroll Business Academy. So what I've always tried to do was have a part of something within the city. And so a lot of people ask, why do you continue to do all this stuff? And at this point, it's not necessarily a business driver as it is, it actually makes me feel good to do it. I've reached a point in my career where I can take time away to do things that bring value to me personally. And that's why I love volunteering. It really is, it's something. And if you get into it for the right reasons, meaning you're doing it because you have a passion, it touches you, or you just want to give back, you will be rewarded far more than you can imagine. But if you're just doing it to meet people, to grow your business, you will find that it won't work out the way you think it will. Yeah. And I learned that lesson as well, because I did get involved with several just because I wanted to meet more people and sell more insurance. And at the end of the day, I was getting burned out because I didn't have a passion for helping them, because I entered into it the wrong way. And the reason I still do a lot in the chamber and the city is because I still enjoy doing it. And I just want the people to see I'm still out here giving to the community. A lot of people in my particular industry, after reaching a certain level in their career, they tend to slow down from community things because they really don't need to do it anymore to grow their business. And I think that's where you need to do it the most, because in our industry, you can become complacent in it because, you get a large block of business, you get renewals, life is good, and you think, well, I don't have to work as much anymore. But what happens in those situations is when you start to pull back, you lose control of your business. You're not watching everything. And then you wind up maybe a year later going back to the chamber or back to the networking events that you used to take a part in, because that's how you grew your business to begin with. The problem I would have is the amount of work that I put in to get to where I'm at. If I took a break for 6 months to a year, I'm afraid I don't have that hustle to get back to where I am now. And that's what I try to explain to people. You don't have to do everything that I do, but you need to do something on a continuous basis to keep your name in the community.
Yeah, that's great advice. Are there other principles or habits that you practice that you feel help you sustain that kind of success?
Well, I think primarily one of the drivers for my success is that I'm not what you would consider a salesman. I show up at a networking event, I'm not passing cards out. If you ask for one, I'll give you one, but I'm not that guy. I'd rather get to know you personally to see if we're going to be a fit to begin with. I'm not a fit for everyone, but I have referral partners that I have met that if for some reason your industry, your business, your vehicles or home are just not really what State Farm's looking for, I got somebody that can help you, because I don't want to just turn people away. I want to guide them to someone else that can help. That's been a big key factor for me. When we do ribbon cuttings, I typically show up 15 minutes early because I want to talk to the business owner one-on-one. But I don't show up as Bill Tait State Farm. I show up as Bill Tait, an ambassador for the Southlake Chamber. My goal in that 15 minutes before everybody gets there is to make sure they understand what's going to happen at the ribbon cutting, help them find a good location for a photo that has their logo somewhere in the background. If they need to move furniture around, set food up, I just want to help. Now, eventually they might ask, well, what do you do? And then that opens up that conversation. I think not leading with your business sometimes puts people no longer on the defensive, where they're like, here comes the salesman. They're kind of like, wow, this guy's really helpful. I wonder what he does.
Yeah.
And I tend to believe if they because I'm so helpful in those areas that I tend to believe that they think I'd be just as helpful in my industry to them. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things that I do to just kind of maintain in the community and just continue to drive my name.
Yeah. For April and I, we like to surround ourselves with high performing individuals. Like it's fascinating to hear their story, but also to learn from others. Like we both have a growth mindset, and that's just how we kind of approach things. But I've seen you practice that. Like you are extremely well known for what you do in the community, but I also see you surround yourself with other high performing individuals. How do you determine who to surround yourself in your circle to continue being successful and growing, as an individual?
That's really a great question because in my entire career, I never had a mentor. I had my father I could go to ask questions because he was in the insurance industry. But now I needed someone closer. And as I was going through my journey with State Farm, that first year was just the hardest year I think I had ever faced. But what was interesting is one thing that the chamber did provide was my mentor. Not on purpose. It just happened to go to a ribbon cutting for a gentleman that had a roofing company. And we struck up a conversation, and he came and visited me in my office a couple days later, and turned out we had a lot of similar interests. And he has been super successful in this community for over 20 years, barely advertises, doesn't network, basically stays at home and runs his business. And so my thought was, I need to learn what he knows. And so we get together once a month. Sometimes it's lunch. Sometimes we go down to the stockyards to have fun. But really what he did for me was in my first year in business, our rates were really high. I mean, I was having a hard time selling. And that was where the problem came in because I was selling. And I went to him one day and I said, I'm just really having a hard time. He said, well, tell me what the problem is. He says, well, the rates are really high. I'm telling people what the rates are. And they're like, well, mine's, this price. And can you do any better? And he said, you're going about this the whole wrong way. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He says, they're not buying State Farm. He said, they're buying you. What do you do for the clients that no one else does? And I took that back to the office and I thought about that for a good 24 hours. And then I just redesigned everything that I said based on what he told me to do. And from that moment on, I've never looked back. And my growth I've grown every year over and over and over. And it was changing my mindset. It was changing that, oh, well, this is the policy and this is this. It was, do you realize if a claim goes sideways and you tell me what the problem is, and it doesn't sound right from the company's perspective, then I'll continue to fight. I will continue to fight if it's right. And me and this gentleman have fought so many times to get roofs taken care of, and we win 90% of them. We do, but it takes that extra fight sometimes. And really what changed, why I've needed that mentor was my first year when I started, there was a bunch of new members to the chamber. We all kind of joined at the same time. We all kind of friended each other, and we were really working hard together, and we were doing events together so we could all grow our business at the same time. Well, some of them started to drop off. They weren't networking anymore. They weren't coming to things. They were basically just staying in their office, and we'd get together like normal, and all they would do is complain. I can't get any business from Southlake. No one's coming to my business. The chamber hasn't done anything for me. And the whole time I'm like, I really don't understand what you're saying because my business is thriving. My business is growing. I'm getting a tremendous amount from Southlake. So in that moment, I had to cut several people that I started in the chamber with, growing our businesses together because their values were just not the same as mine. They were looking at excuses as to why their business wasn't growing instead of figuring out how to change that. And so once I got rid of them, that negativity, the more times you're around negative people, you will start to become negative. You will feed off their energy. So when I met my mentor, the energy I'm feeding off from him is just elevating me and making me feel more confident and sharper in what I do. I mean, he changed everything for me. He's the one that got me into boots. He's the one that got me into hats. He changed everything about me.
That's remarkable. And thank you for sharing all of that. I think one of those things that I pick up on in that is just the value of leadership. And I've seen you be a leader. You're involved with Southlake leadership. What are those qualities that you feel truly separate someone who's an actual leader and someone who's just trying to use the name?
Well, having been involved in the Southlake Leadership Program for the last 7 years, you can see a leader pretty quickly. And a lot of times what I find, it's someone that is not as fast to talk as they are to listen, because a lot of times a true leader wants to actually hear what you're saying, understand it from your point of view before start talking again. So a lot of times someone will start talking, and before you even finish, the other person hasn't heard everything you've said. They've just caught on to just snippets of it, and that's what they're going to respond to. So you get that over talking each other. I think a true leader will stop and listen and let that person get all the words out before they formulate what they're going to do. The other thing, and I see this more and more now, is when people just want to give you a problem, but haven't even thought of a solution yet. So if I have a client and I already know, I see something on their file, I'm like, this is going to be a problem. The first thing I want to do is, okay, before I tell them there's a problem, I need to figure out alternate solutions to this problem. Because if I approach somebody with just a problem and be like, what do you want to do? I'm going to get a very bad response. But if I say, hey, I just want to let you know, here's the problem that I saw, and I came up with a couple alternate solutions I'd like to send you to take a look at, or we can meet and discuss if maybe one of those will satisfy you. That's a true leader. The leader says, here's the problem, but here's the solution. And if someone just tells you the problems all the time without solutions and you have to come up with the solutions, I don't really classify that person as a true leader. So those are kind of some of the things I look at. Empathy. I mean, I've met with people that are struggling in the chamber. Their businesses are close to being closed, and it's hard. It's hard to sit in those meetings with individuals like that, because they're coming to me like I can save them, and I want to so desperately. I come up with ideas and things, but sometimes it's just too late in the game, because once you get to that point, it's really difficult to make your way back. But when I sit in those meetings, I don't sit in there like, well, you should have done this earlier. You should have done that. It's more about the empathy that I have for the situation that they're in. And can we work together and maybe come up with solutions? Is there something that we can do together? Can we do an event together just to get your name out there? But a lot of it is just, you've got to put the work in. I mean, people join the chamber all the time. I do the new member orientation. I make that offer at every single one. And if we have 10 people, normally 1 or 2 will take me up on it. And then others don't. And then sometimes I never see them again. I don't see them at any event in the chamber. So I think their perception is, if I join, I'll be successful. But that when you join, all the chamber can do is provide you with opportunities for people to get to know you through networking groups, lunches, events. The like and trust part, that's on you. And so it's difficult sometimes, but being a true leader, you've got to sit through the good, the bad, and the ugly and try and help someone out.
Yeah, I love the concept of coming up with a solution, especially before you even present the problem to the client. In our industry, we found that to be just immensely helpful, mostly from just a client experience perspective.
Absolutely.
When a problem comes up with, construction, and we've got to solve for that. We know it's going to be like something that's probably not going to be, something that's going to bring the client a lot of satisfaction to hear the bad news. So before we do that, the approach is like, all right, let's come up with a few solutions. Let's present some options. And then oftentimes what we find is then when we present that problem to the client and then the solutions and options, they feel like we have their interest in mind. Like
Exactly.
we've already been thinking of these things on their behalf, and we're trying to provide some value back to them to mitigate that. And oftentimes it's like not even an issue. They're like, hey, like, yeah, this option is great. I think we should go ahead and do it. And the problem is almost like non-existent. It's not even part of what they're thinking about anymore, because you presented something that's valuable to them and they want to go with that. You just brought them value. So I love that approach to problem solving. We encourage that among our team. even just internally, like as we're trying to solve problems, like, hey, before you present a problem to your team member, like come up with some solutions, and then y'all collaborate and figure out which one of those solutions is the best and present that as your next step.
Exactly. It's really funny you mention that because a lot of times when the problem, we perceive it to be bigger than it actually is. And as business owners, our nervousness is we're going to upset the client. They're going to be mad at us. They're going to leave a bad Google review. And when you call them and because you offer that solution, they're like, well, that's not so bad. Yeah, I'll go with that. And so you worried yourself to sickness almost. And it turned out, and I think it's because the solution was offered as well. See, if you just offer them the problem, then they will be upset. And then they're going to look to you like, well, what is the solution? I don't understand. How are you going to fix this? But if you already have that ready, it just makes the conversation easier.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, have there been any horror stories that you've encountered where there was a problem and the client would have benefited from more education, more involvement, or knowledge about their insurance policy?
Yes. Fortunately, I haven't had any bad situations on anything that I personally oversaw. And what I mean by that is when I took over the agency, they gave me a certain amount of clientele to begin with. So I didn't write any of those policies. And really where the issue sometimes comes in with insurance, it's all around claims. It's really all around claims. When should you file a claim? Is this a claim? Should I call my agent first? And what kind of endorsements do I have in my policy? So a lot of times there's two particular endorsements that State Farm has. One is designed to cover the pipes inside your foundation if they bust or leak, commonly referred to as a slab leak. That is traditionally not covered in a policy automatically. It either has to be endorsed, added on, or sometimes you will find it automatically included, but the coverage amounts are extremely low. The other one's called seepage and leakage. So that is your appliance lines, your plumbing lines, and your AC lines. If they're leaking all the time or when in use, those two particular endorsements, the damage that those two claims can cause is astronomical. So I always like to have that conversation ahead of time when we're talking, like, are you familiar with this? Do you have this now? And I want to explain that to them because we see those claims and they can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you could pay $200 to $300 a year to make sure if you had that, it's covered. The other thing when it comes to claims, people just assume I just need to call a claim in for everything. Oh, my toilet overflowed. Well, before the plumber, call the claim in. And that's not what you should do. And so anytime you call a claim in and you get an adjuster assigned, you have a claim on record. That claim might not even be paid. It might not be paid specifically because the damage is under your deductible. So yes, there would have been a claim that we would have covered, but there wasn't enough damage to meet what the company had to pay. And so now you have a zero paid out claim on your record, which over time, if you have another one, it can affect your insurability. Meaning we might cancel you. You might have a hard time getting coverage elsewhere, or it might cost you more money. So what I find biggest problems is when someone decides to leave for a lower cost, which does happen, and I completely understand. I try to have the same conversation with them as they're coming as when they're leaving. I don't talk to them in a negative way because they've decided to leave, because I want to treat them just as good when they leave in hopes that they'll come back. But a lot of times when people just look at price, they don't actually see what they're missing from their policy. So maybe some of the benefits I just mentioned, they don't have them. So I have had situations where people have left. They've had claims where either some of it or none of it was paid. And then they call back to me and they ask questions about why wasn't this covered with their new company. And I explained to them the same thing as when they left. Remember, I told you if you wanted me to look at the quote, let me just tell you, I don't care if you leave me. I just want to make sure you know exactly what you're either getting or giving up. And that's where the biggest issues come into play. Fortunately, my team has done an amazing job. We educate on the front end. We almost sometimes overeducate, because I want you to understand everything about your policy because no one explains it. I mean, I literally started selling insurance, P&C, property and casualty. I didn't even know what any of it meant. I mean, I owned it, but didn't know what any of the numbers meant on any of my policies because no one had actually ever explained it to me. So that's why when I did open up this office, my main goal was to educate everybody on as much about insurance as I possibly could.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, what a value to clients to have that, because I think that is something that's missing. I've personally experienced that too, where I'm like, well, how do I read this policy? How do I know what's covered? Like, I should be hearing this from my insurer, but
Yeah.
if I'm not, like, I'm just hoping, crossing my fingers. So yeah, I think that's a fantastic value that you add to your customers. Going back to like the leaks thing. So in like the luxury home business, we see a lot of new technology that gets put into these homes. And even just in remodels too, sometimes. One of those things is like leak detection systems. Any value at this time with that technology to like splurging on something like that if you're building a new home?
You know, my advice would be yes, get it. Right at this moment in the state of Texas, we don't offer any additional discounts because of that, but I tend to believe in the future we will. Specifically, why is because in California, if your home is over a certain value, it's required to have one of those before State Farm will insure you. And, you know, so let's just say right now there's no discount for having it. But I assure you, if you had a pipe burst in your house and it flooded for a couple hours, you would prefer to have paid ahead to have that leak detection system than to go through the claim process, be out of your home, deal with all that for months and months and months. It would be worth it to do it.
Okay, that's great to know. And another thing that sometimes comes up is like roofs. We're in North Texas. There's hail. The value of a metal roof over shingles, obviously, it's a completely different material. One's very durable, but big difference in the underwriting.
There is. So the thing that I've learned in Texas is the roofing industry isn't necessarily regulated. So anyone can basically be a roofer. And so what you're seeing now in the Texas and certain areas is you're seeing the wind and hail deductibles go to 2% and in some areas 3% minimum. Meaning there is no way to get a 1% anymore just because of the amount of hail claims and a lot of stuff that goes on in that roofing industry. What I encourage people to look at is what's called a class 3 or class 4 impact resistant roof. There are metal ones, there are shingle ones, there's concrete, tile, you name it. What that does is it's going to provide a sturdier product that should resist the traditional hailstorms that we get. Now, if we get softball or baseball, nothing's going to protect you from that. But it provides a significant discount on your homeowner's policy. I see them upwards anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 a year savings. Now, that discount does go down each year a little bit, but I've seen it on there for up to 20 years. So it's worth the investment to look into that. I always tell clients too, don't pull the trigger on it until you let us know what the manufacturer and the brand of that shingle is, because they're constantly updating those. So today that shingle might be approved, but next month it has to go back through reevaluation from the industry. And if they decide they're going to discontinue that product and move on to another one, the moment they stop testing that is the moment that it's no longer gets a discount. Once it's installed. Now, after it's been installed, even if that does become discontinued, you still continue to keep your discount. It's based on the day it's installed, if it's approved.
Wow.
So some people have gone, and they've said, I'll let you know, and they never do. And then they go and get one put on, and turns out the roofer used old shingles that just happen to be in stock, that maybe they got a deal on, impact resistant, but just not qualified for the discount. So it's very important to get with your agent on that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, Bill, about when to talk to your agent about some of these, especially like in renovations, you're adding square footage, putting on a new roof. When is the right time to start talking to the agent for someone who's going through any sort of, remodel or construction process?
I would say in the beginning, it's important to at least let your agent know, hey, this is what I'm going to do. What will you need? Because we want to make sure once it's completed that we go back into the system and reevaluate everything. If you had carpet, now you have hardwood, we want to adjust that because we want to make sure in the event of a loss that we have covered your home enough to make sure that it's going to get rebuilt just the way it was. So it is important to at least start the conversation, but don't delay once it's done. Now, most policies have an additional percentage on top of what you're insured for. For example, State Farm gives 20%. So if we insure your property for 100% of what we say it should be, then if you have a total loss, there's an additional 20% on top of that as well for rebuild, which can help in situations like we experienced a couple years ago where cost of goods skyrocketed, cost of labor skyrocketed, rental homes, if you had a loss, the rental homes now are charging you twice as much to get in. So that can help for situations like that, or the family that did the renovation but forgot to tell their agent. That extra is always in there as well.
Okay, that's great. That's a wealth of information, Bill. The other thing that April and I see is we have a number of clients who they've been successful in life and in business, and they're now at a point where they're able to build like their legacy home. They've lived in nice communities, but now they're building a custom home. Square footage is often significantly more. They're using luxury finishes and things like that. Is there, from a underwriting perspective, how big of a difference for someone who's living in one of our communities now, and now they're finally building their custom home? What do they need to know before they start that process? In terms of what their insurance is going to look like in a home like that.
It can be difficult in the beginning because when we do our tool to figure out the value of your home, when you don't have a home yet, you just have the plans. We can take the plans and ballpark it to a degree to give you an idea of what the rate will be. The other thing is some companies, I know State Farm does, we give what's called a utility discount. So a brand new home is going to have the highest utility discount that we offer because everything is brand new. We also do that for people who renovate their homes. So if you were to strip a house down to the studs, new plumbing, new electrical, new AC, that also would qualify for a utility discount like a brand new home. So there's not really anything that I would provide as far as you should do this or don't do that. It would be more of, let's just find out what the insurance cost will be to begin with, and then go from there. But I do encourage them, if they're building a home, impact resistant roof, look at things like that. Anything that would be more cost beneficial to do it now than later, because you're just not going to go back later and do some of those things.
Yeah. A popular topic. I want to ask you about this. What do you see rates? Where do you see them going?
Well, that is a great question because all I've seen them in the since 2020, all they've done is gone up. Almost every single renewal, every single company has taken rate increases. I know we've had some rate decreases on our auto policies, which is good. I haven't seen any yet on the homes. I'm optimistic that if we just stay flat, I don't see the home rates dropping anytime soon, but if they could just remain level, I think we would be in a good position. It's all based on claim activity and expenses. That's where, so when rates go down, like we saw in the middle of 2020, because everybody was at home, less claims, less expensive, lower rates. But then once everybody was back to work, claims went right back to the normal average in the industry. So therefore, you started to see the rate increases again. We had that huge freeze in 2020, and then we had another smaller one in 2021. And between that, we had a huge hailstorm in this area in Tarrant County. So that drove the rates up for every company as well.
one final question I want to ask you, and I'll say this first. Like, I think a lot of the information you've shared today, both from a professional perspective, but also within your industry, I mean, it's just a wealth of information. So thank you for sharing all of this, Bill. But the final question I have for you is, what do you want your legacy to be here in Southlake, or just in general?
You know, I've thought about that a lot more recently, only because I'm getting older and I start to see some of the people that I mentored, how successful they've become in the community faster than I did. And it actually feels good. So, you know, when I think about when I'm done with State Farm, you know, what would I want people in this community or the chamber to remember me by when they say Bill Tait? I really just want people to remember that I was just a giver. I have a giver's heart. I just want to help anybody I can. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. If I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'm there 15 minutes early. I just want to be the person that is reliable, that you can count on. And I think that's what I've been for the last 8 years in the community, and that's what I continue to do. As long as my health keeps going, I will continue to do this as long as I want. But I think that's what I'd like my legacy to be, just a community giver, just a guy that was always there to help people.
I think you're living that legacy now, Bill. I mean, you opened a lot of doors for April and I. I'm happy that we get to call you a friend, as well as quite literally our neighbor.
Neighbor, yes.
So, Bill, for folks who want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Best way is probably just to call my office at 817-251-8900. However, if you'd like to stop by, I'm at 565 South Kimball Avenue, Suite 120. Always there to help you.
Thanks again for coming on the show today, Bill. Just really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it.